Johnny Carson uncovered 9 guests of the Golden Age who were really evil. Johnny Carson introduced America's largest stars into living rooms nationwide for 30 years. Carson's warm, friendly smile and easygoing chuckle made people feel as if they were sitting in their living rooms watching old pals chat over coffee. But once the cameras were turned off and the audience left, Carson's smile tended to vanish. America's favorite host, according to those around him, maintained a psychic blacklist of visitors he deemed really awful human beings. Johnny was the consummate professional on television, said a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for more than a decade. But the moment we went to commercial, he would occasionally turn to Ed and quietly say, "That person should never be around a camera or a child." In his later years, Carson grew more frank about the celebrities he'd secretly disliked throughout his life. The anecdotes he shared with close friends present a troubling portrait of icons we loved who were horrid creatures behind their meticulously constructed public facades. Most surprising were Carson's disclosures regarding one iconic actress who seemed fragile and demure on his couch, but in the wings had abused a young production assistant with verbal taunts so abusive that security needed to step in. And the iconic male star whom Carson caught doing something so grotesque in his dressing room that the host came close to calling the authorities. These weren't just tough egos or demanding actors. They were truly dark individuals who were using talent and fame as a veil, Carson suggests. Manipulators, predators, abusers who the industry shielded for so long. But let's begin with the first name on Carson's list and why the individual earned his strongest disdain and the private backstage altercation that no one has ever publicized until now. Well, to start with, I'm stage struck, and I think they all know that. Second, I attempt to obtain a movie that possesses audience identification. Joan Crawford, Hollywood's queen with ice in her veins. When Joan Crawford guested on The Tonight Show in 1970, audiences saw the gracious old Hollywood legend they'd revered for decades. With impeccable posture, flawless grooming, and rehearsed charm, Crawford was the epitome of old Hollywood glamour. But from several Tonight Show staff members, however, Crawford's behind-the-scenes conduct indicated a vastly different individual. She was one of the coolest people I've ever interviewed, Carson allegedly informed his biographer years after the fact. Like interviewing a stunning statuette with nothing within. Crawford's on-air presence started to be a problem before she even arrived at the studio. Her requests involved specific lighting needs so detailed that the technical director of the show still had the 4-page memo decades later. Everything was to be exact, remembered one former producer. The position of her chair, the height of Johnny's desk, even the studio temperature, precisely 67 degrees, not 66, not 68. When Crawford eventually arrived 3 hours prior to taping, she imported her own makeup staff. In spite of the show having award-winning makeup artists on the payroll, but what really showed Crawford's personality was the way she treated individuals differently according to their stature. She nearly curtsied to Johnny, said a stagehand who was there that day. But when a young production assistant mistakenly entered her dressing room with water she had ordered, Crawford erupted. In the opinion of several witnesses, Crawford went on a profanity-laced tirade, so ugly that employees in the hallway stopped in their tracks. She reportedly referred to the assistant, a 20-year-old who was new to the business, as a brainless little __, and told her she should get a job at a brothel where she could truly be incompetent. The young woman ran crying from the set, and Crawford insisted she be let go. Carson's producer didn't, causing tension that continued throughout taping. But the worst of Crawford's visit wasn't so much what she did to staff. It was the methodical manner she converted and instant cameras rolled. She was a machine impersonating a woman, one producer remembered. She had practiced each answer, each chuckle, each improvised moment. It was all fake. Between commercials, Crawford would quickly shed the smile and sit in stony-faced silence, not saying a word to anyone, then suddenly revive as soon as the red light resumed. Carson, a master of putting guests at ease, had difficulty finding any real rapport with Crawford. Following the show, he supposedly informed Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Christina Crawford's memoir, Mommy Dearest disclosed Joan's supposed abuse of her adopted children, Carson was not surprised. By close acquaintances, he just nodded and exclaimed, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." But if Crawford's calculating coldness unsettled Carson, his next adversary embodied something he found even more unsettling: raw power used to intimidate and threaten. I can respond to that by letting you know that during those sweet moments, I played Daphne and Chloe, or the Frank Sinatra, the dashing bully Carson detested. On television, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson seemed to have a friendly, even cordial relationship. The legendary singer would banter, joke, and on occasion sing, while Carson filled in as the deferential host. Behind the scenes, though, Carson was said to have a personal disdain for Sinatra. Not for his ability, with which Carson had always maintained respect, but for the way Old Blue Eyes behave around people when he believed no one of note was paying attention. If he didn't sing, he'd be an enforcer, Carson once explained to a friend, according to several biographies. And occasionally, I think he was both. Sinatra's guest spots on The Tonight Show were infamous among staff members for being stressful. What longtime staff described as Sinatra arriving with up to 8 men in tow who were said not to be show business types, but rather guys you don't want to run into in an alley. These men would pervade the studio watching crew in an atmosphere another cameraman likened to feeling under observation. But what really unsettled Carson was seeing how Sinatra treated those he considered to be below him. One time, during an appearance in the early 1970s, a floor manager committed the error of giving Sinatra the customary 3 minutes notice before his bit. Sinatra reached out and grasped the man's tie and pulled him in, shouting, "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a 50-year-old Korean War veteran, was visibly shaken afterwards. Carson, watching this exchange on his office monitor, nearly canceled the segment. It took only the producer's reminder of what rating Sinatra would deliver to persuade him to stay. Another area of conflict was Sinatra's punctuality or lack of it. He allegedly canceled appearances at the last minute several times, including once just 2 hours prior to taping when he was already on the building, but then decided he wasn't up for it. The most telling moment was during a commercial break when Sinatra made a derogatory remark about a female staff member's looks, loudly enough for those around him to hear. Carson, abandoning his characteristic professional aloofness, icily retorted, "We don't speak about my staff like that here." Tension crackled with Sinatra openly shocked that someone, even Johnny Carson, would push back. When the cameras rolled again, the two men preserved their professional masks, but crew members observed Carson's questions growing much shorter and less interested. Following that appearance, Carson supposedly informed his producer, "I don't care what his ratings are. Limit him to once a year maximum." What makes this especially revealing is the fact that Carson seldom got involved with booking decisions and rarely barred guests from appearing. To have banned Sinatra from appearing said so much about Carson's own disdain for the singer's conduct. And while Sinatra embodied the bully aspect of celebrity influence, Carson's subsequent troublesome guest embodied another type of troublesome, the hubristic ego that recognized no limits or formats. Now the counterargument to what I'm saying is that the world is full. The best young filmmakers are saturated. Orson Welles, the genius who believed rules were beneath him. Orson Welles was a guest on The Tonight Show several times during the Carson period, always producing great television with his booming voice, larger-than-life personality, and incredible tales from his long history in films. Home viewers witnessed a witty, genius drama.